Somewhere along the quiet waters of the James River in Virginia, dozens of massive warships sit in silence. No crews, no engines running, no missions, just steel and rust slowly disappearing into fog. These are not wrecks. These are not abandoned relics. These are some of the most powerful war machines ever built by human hands, and the United States Navy parked them there on purpose. Some have been sitting for decades. Others cost more to destroy than they did to build. And right now, as you are watching this, a 51-year-old nuclear aircraft carrier is on its way to join them. A machine that once projected American power across every ocean on Earth, heading to a graveyard. The price tag on what is sitting in these graveyards across America runs into the hundreds of billions of dollars. And the cost of getting rid of them? That story will shock you. Introduction. These are not just old ships. Every single one of them represents thousands of American servicemen and women who gave years of their lives aboard these decks. These vessels crossed the Persian Gulf. They patrolled the South China Sea. They launched strikes that changed the course of history. And now they sit, silently, waiting for a fate that is complicated, expensive, and unlike anything most people ever think about. What happens to a warship when its mission is over? That question has no simple answer. And when you dig into it, you find a story full of billion-dollar decisions, environmental crises, radioactive headaches, and some of the most fascinating naval history you have never been told. Drop a comment below right now. Type "Never Forgotten" if you believe every ship that served this great nation deserves to be remembered. Segment 2. The Ghost Fleet. What it actually is. Most people think that when a warship is decommissioned, it simply gets sold or scrapped. The reality is far more complicated than that. The United States Navy maintains what is officially called the National Defense Reserve Fleet, but most people know it by a different name, the Mothball Fleet, or the Ghost Fleet. Both names fit perfectly. This system was born right after World War II ended in 1945. The country suddenly had thousands of warships it no longer needed. Sinking them all was wasteful. Selling them all was risky. So the Navy made a decision: store them. Keep them preserved and ready just in case America ever needed them again in a hurry. At its absolute peak in 1950, the reserve fleet held more than 2,000 ships spread across 8 locations around the country. 2,000 ships. Sitting, waiting, a floating army of steel, going nowhere. Over the decades, that number shrank dramatically. Some ships were reactivated during Korea, some went back to sea during Vietnam. In the 1980s, when President Reagan launched his famous 600-ship Navy program, several of these mothballed vessels were dusted off and brought back to life. But most of them never left. They just sat there, year after year, slowly aging, and the question of what to do with them became one of the most expensive and complicated problems the Navy ever faced. Today, the fleet has shrunk to fewer than 50 Navy warships in inactive status, with the broader National Defense Reserve Fleet sitting at around 91 vessels as of 2021. 3 main locations still hold these ships: the James River in Virginia, Suisun Bay in California, and Beaumont in Texas. There is also a significant concentration of inactive Navy warships at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, currently the largest such facility in the country, holding several dozen inactive warships. Segment 3. What happens the day a warship retires? Here is something most people never think about. The day a warship gets decommissioned, it does not just get locked up and forgotten. There is a whole process, and it starts immediately. The moment a ship is decommissioned, crews begin stripping it. The weapons systems come off first. The radars, the electronic suites, the deck guns, all removed. Some of that equipment goes to active ships as spare parts. Some gets put into long-term storage. The sensitive technology disappears into classified programs or gets destroyed entirely. Then the ship gets sealed up. The hatches are closed. The fuel tanks are drained and cleaned. The engines are preserved with special coatings to slow down corrosion. The goal is to keep the ship in what the Navy calls a preservation state, not operational, but not dead either. Just suspended, tugboats then move the ship to one of the reserve fleet locations where it gets moored alongside other retired vessels. Small maintenance crews periodically check on them, monitoring for leaks, corrosion, and structural issues. These ships are essentially in a coma, kept alive just enough that they could theoretically be brought back. But here is where the story gets interesting, because most of these ships, once they go in, never come back out. Segment 4. The Locations. America's Naval Graveyards. James River, Virginia. The James River Reserve Fleet is the oldest in the country. It was first established in 1919, then reopened after World War II in 1946. At its peak, it held 800 ships along that river. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, aircraft carriers, all lined up in rows, sometimes 10 across, stretching for miles. As of the most recent count, around 9 ships remain there. Suisun Bay, California, about 45 miles northeast of San Francisco, the Suisun Bay Reserve Fleet became one of the most famous and most controversial of all the graveyard locations. Since 1946, roughly 1,000 ships have been moored there at various points. In 1956, it hit a peak of 324 vessels. But over the decades, a serious problem developed. These ships began leaking. Paint peeled off their hulls. Toxic chemicals, heavy metals, polychlorinated biphenyls, anti-fouling agents began contaminating the bay. Estimates suggest these ships shed 20 tons of toxic paint into the water over the years. Environmental groups sued the government. The legal fight went on for years. Eventually, the ships were removed and scrapped. As of September 2025, only 9 ships remain there. Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. This is the big one right now. The largest concentration of inactive Navy warships in the United States. Dozens of ships sit here, including Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruisers, Oliver Hazard Perry-class frigates, and various amphibious assault ships. Most of them are officially stricken from the Naval Vessel Register and are simply waiting for a decision on their final fate. Before we get into the most jaw-dropping part of this story, the billion-dollar nuclear nightmare sitting at the center of all this, do us one quick favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. More than 98% of the people watching this right now are not subscribed. It takes 2 seconds and it keeps stories like this one coming your way. Segment 5. The ships that cannot be sunk, sold, or scrapped easily. Now here is where the graveyard gets truly complicated. And expensive. Most conventional warships, the frigates, the destroyers, the cruisers, can be scrapped through standard methods. Sold to allied nations, used for target practice in live fire exercises, or broken down at commercial shipyards. 2 conventionally powered aircraft carriers, the USS Kitty Hawk and the USS John F. Kennedy, were literally sold for 1 penny each to a scrapping facility in Brownsville, Texas, 1 cent. For 2 aircraft carriers. The Navy was just glad to have someone take them. But nuclear-powered ships? Completely different story. Nuclear warships carry reactors, and when those reactors go cold, they do not simply disappear. The radioactive material inside them has to be carefully removed, transported, and stored, often for thousands of years. The U.S. Navy has been dealing with this problem since the 1980s, when nuclear submarines started retiring in large numbers. But submarines are relatively small. What nobody fully thought through was what happens when you start retiring nuclear aircraft carriers. Enter the USS Enterprise. Hull number CVN-65. The world's first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Launched in 1958. It served the Navy for 51 years, participating in the Cuban Missile Crisis blockade, the Vietnam War, the fall of Saigon evacuation, and post-September 11th combat operations. It was decommissioned in 2017. And then things got complicated. Very complicated. The Enterprise was built with not 2 reactors like every other nuclear carrier, but 8. 8 separate nuclear reactors buried deep inside a 76,000-ton ship. No other carrier in history was built this way. That design made the Enterprise extraordinarily powerful. It also made her nearly impossible to dismantle. The Navy quickly discovered it could not turn the Enterprise into a museum, too much radioactive and hazardous material still on board. It could not sink her for target practice for the same reason. It could not even recycle her the way it had recycled nuclear submarines, because the sheer volume of radioactive material involved was closer to decommissioning a full nuclear power plant than scrapping a ship. For years, the Navy and civilian nuclear regulators fought over who was even responsible for overseeing the dismantlement. Cost estimates kept rising. Early projections in 2013 put the price at $500 million. By 2017, that number had risen past $1 billion. A ship that was sold to protect American freedom, now costing $1 billion just to take apart. Eventually, in 2025, the Navy awarded a $536 million contract to North Star Maritime Dismantlement Services in Mobile, Alabama, to begin the process. The work is expected to take at least 5 years, potentially longer, and the lessons learned from dismantling the Enterprise will directly shape how the Navy handles its next enormous challenge. The Nimitz class. Segment 6. The Nimitz, the story happening right now. The USS Nimitz. Hull number CVN-68. The lead ship of America's most famous class of nuclear carriers. It entered service on 3 May 1975, and as of the day this video was made, it is still in active service. Barely, originally. The Navy planned to retire the Nimitz in fiscal year 2025. Then it got pushed to May 2026. Then, on 14 March 2026, the Navy announced yet another extension, this time 10 more months, pushing decommissioning all the way to March 2027. Why? Because of a law passed by Congress in 2011 that requires the Navy to maintain at least 11 operational aircraft carriers at all times. The Nimitz's replacement, the USS John F. Kennedy, a new Ford-class carrier, has experienced construction delays and is not scheduled to enter service until around March 2027. So the Nimitz has to stay. Not because she is needed for any strategic reason, not because she is in fighting shape, but because the law requires a number and retirement would drop the count below 11. Think about that. A 51-year-old warship kept running at enormous expense purely to satisfy a legal requirement. When the Nimitz finally does retire, the costs will be staggering. Navy estimates put the inactivation process alone at up to $1 billion, due to the complexity of dealing with 2 nuclear reactors and decades of accumulated radioactive material. Full dismantlement could take 5 to 10 years, potentially lasting into the early 2030s. And the Nimitz is just the first of 10 Nimitz-class carriers that will eventually need to be retired and dismantled. 10 ships, each one a $1 billion disposal problem. The Navy has set up a special office, the CVN Inactivation and Disposal Program Office, established in 2024 specifically to manage this challenge. The total cost of retiring and dismantling all 10 Nimitz-class carriers over the coming decades? Nobody has published a firm number. But given the figures already associated with Enterprise and Nimitz alone, the total runs well into the tens of billions of dollars. Add in all the other warships sitting in reserve fleets, and the word trillion in the title of this video starts to make a lot of sense. Segment 7. Could these ships ever come back? Here is a question worth asking. Could any of these mothballed ships be brought back to active service in an emergency? The Navy has looked at this question seriously. In recent years, officials examined every ship on the inactive list to see what could realistically be reactivated. The answer was sobering. Most of the Perry-class frigates that were mothballed have been stripped so thoroughly that bringing them back would cost more than building a new ship. The same goes for most of the Ticonderoga-class cruisers sitting in Philadelphia. Their weapon systems were removed, their electronics are outdated, their hulls have years of corrosion. The one exception that briefly got attention was the USS Kitty Hawk, a conventionally powered carrier that was retired in 2009. It was modernized enough in its later years to potentially handle current carrier aircraft, but by the time anyone looked at bringing it back, it had already been so heavily stripped that the refurbishment costs made the option unworkable. The Kitty Hawk is now being broken down for scrap. The Ready Reserve Force, a subset of the broader reserve fleet that is kept in better condition, currently holds around 48 ships specifically maintained for rapid reactivation. These are mostly support vessels, cargo ships, tankers, and amphibious transports. They are kept in a state where they could theoretically be crewed and operational within 4 to 20 days. Some of them have been successfully used in exactly that way during previous emergencies. But the fighting warships? The carriers? The cruisers? The frigates that once defined American sea power? Most of them are gone for good. Some sold, some sunk, some now sitting at the bottom of the ocean as artificial reefs, and the ones still in the graveyards are largely waiting for one final journey to a scrapyard at a cost the American taxpayer will ultimately pay. Segment 8. The Legacy in the Silence. There is something powerful about standing near one of these reserve fleet locations and looking out at those gray holes in the water. Quiet, still, covered in surface rust and years of salt air. Each one of those ships had a crew. Thousands of American men and women who lived aboard these decks for months at a time, who slept in tight berthing compartments, who worked 12-hour shifts, who were away from their families, from their homes, from their lives, because they believed in something bigger than themselves. The USS Nimitz alone has had tens of thousands of sailors walk its decks across more than 50 years of service. It participated in operations spanning 4 decades, from the Indian Ocean to the Persian Gulf to the Indo-Pacific. Its air wing has launched strikes in more theaters of conflict than most people can name. These are not just machines. They are floating chapters of American military history, and the fact that retiring them costs billions, that their nuclear hearts make them too dangerous to simply scrap, is in some ways a testament to just how advanced and powerful they truly were. The graveyards along America's waterways are not places of failure, they are places of honor. Every ship that sits in those quiet waters earned its rest. Conclusion: the story of these retired warships is one that most people never see. It plays out quietly, in shipyards and river anchorages far from the public eye. Billion-dollar decisions made in conference rooms. Nuclear material being carefully moved in convoy across state lines. Steel that once cut through the world's oceans now sitting still, waiting for its final chapter. The Nimitz is heading there, the rest of the Nimitz class will follow. And the price of retiring these machines, the true cost of fielding the most powerful naval force in history, will be paid for generations to come. If this story gave you something to think about, hit that like button and make sure you are subscribed. Stories about the men, the machines, and the history that built American military power, that is what this channel is about.